The man they thought would just take it quietly already had something else brewing. My name is Mitch Taylor. I'm 41 years old, living just outside Columbus, Ohio. I've worked at Martech for almost 9 years, long enough to see the company grow from a scrappy startup into a corporate machine that barely recognizes the people who built it. That morning, I walked into the conference room thinking I was getting a promotion. My numbers were solid, my clients trusted me more than the company itself. Dennis Porter, the guy they sent from corporate, had been hinting for weeks about realignment and rewarding key talent. I should have known better. Tracy from HR was already there, sitting stiff as a mannequin with her folder and fake smile. Dennis, in his gray suit and too perfect haircut, looked like every guy who uses words like synergy without knowing what they mean. "Morning, Mitch," Dennis said, flashing teeth that probably cost more than my kid's braces. "We'll make this quick." I sat down, waiting for the usual corporate nonsense. "We appreciate your dedication. You're a key part of the team, maybe even congratulations." Instead, Dennis slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "This is your updated compensation package," he said, like he was doing me a favor. I glanced at it and felt my stomach twist. A 60% pay cut, not a typo, not a temporary adjustment, just a cold, hard slash to everything I'd worked for. I looked at Tracy. She shifted uncomfortably and said, "It's effective immediately." "Effective immediately," I repeated, my voice flat. Dennis started talking about market realignment, new priorities, and maintaining flexibility. I barely heard him. I was too busy trying to keep my face calm, like my chest wasn't burning. 9 years. I'd saved accounts they would have lost. I'd brought in millions. I'd trained half the sales team they were still bragging about. And this was my thanks? A 60% cut and some HR puppet acting like it was just another Tuesday. "Any questions?" Dennis asked. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to ask if they thought I was an idiot. But instead, I said, "I'll think about it." Dennis nodded like he'd expected me to cry or beg. Tracy gave a polite little smile, the kind you give someone you've just stabbed. I picked up the paper, folded it once, and left the room. I walked through the office without looking at anyone. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. I made it to the parking lot, got into my truck, and just sat there. I don't even know how long I stayed like that. Maybe 40 minutes, maybe more. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I stared at the paper on the passenger seat. The words blurred until they didn't look real anymore. I thought about my kid, about the medical bills I'd been covering, about the house payment. I thought about the years I'd missed dinner with my son because I was flying out to save some account that would have tanked without me. And I broke, not in the loud, dramatic way, just quietly. My chest hurt, my eyes burned, and I couldn't even see straight. I wasn't just angry, I was humiliated. Somewhere in the middle of it, a thought settled in my mind like a rock in a pond. They think I'll take this. They think I'll roll over. But I had something else brewing. I'd been careful over the years, building real relationships with my clients, not just the company's version of them. I'd kept my old contacts warm. If Martech wanted to gut me, they might find out just how replaceable I wasn't. I started the truck, but didn't drive away. Not yet. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, an unknown number flashing across the screen. I didn't know it then, but that call was about to change everything. I was still sitting in my truck, staring at nothing, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. My head was pounding from the quiet breakdown I'd just had. But something in me grabbed it anyway. "Kira?" I said, seeing the name flash across the screen. "Mitch! Finally I got you!" she said, her voice bursting with energy. Kira had been on my team years ago, back when we were the scrappy underdogs. She left for a startup called Volt Edge, and I hadn't heard from her in a while. "You okay? You sound..." She paused, reading me through the silence. "Different." "Just a day," I muttered. She didn't waste time. "Look, I've been meaning to call. Volt Edge has been asking about you for months. They know the accounts you handle, Mitch. They know you're the guy with the trust, not Martech." I sat up straighter. "Wait, what?" "They want you," she said bluntly. "We've lost 2 bids to Martech this year, and both times your name came up in client debriefs. They don't trust the company, Mitch. They trust you." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Funny. My company doesn't seem to think I'm worth much. Kira's voice dropped. What happened? I told her, flat and fast. The meeting, the 60% pay cut, the fake smiles. She didn't even try to hide her outrage. Are you kidding me? 9 years, Mitch. You carried half that portfolio on your back. Yeah, well, I said, apparently I'm too expensive to keep around. That's their mistake, she said. Listen, meet Cameron Reed. He's our CEO. He wants to talk to you. Tomorrow morning, diner on East 12th, 7 a.m. No pressure, just a conversation. I hesitated. I don't know. Mitch, she cut in, you don't see your own value, but Voltage does. We've been planning to poach you for over a year. I blinked. Planning to what? You think I called you on a whim? She laughed. Cameron's been watching Martex try to bleed you dry. We knew they'd screw up eventually, and when they did, we'd be ready. The line went quiet for a second while I processed that. I wasn't just a name on a resume, I was a piece of leverage in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I'll meet him, I said finally. Good, she said, relief in her voice. Trust me, you won't regret it. When the call ended, I sat there staring at my own reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My pulse had shifted. There was anger, yeah, but now there was something sharper under it. Possibility. That night, I pulled my old employment contract out of the desk drawer. The paper was worn, coffee stains on the edges from the early days when we were all pulling 16-hour shifts just to stay afloat. I read every line. Halfway through, I found it. No non-compete. My lips twisted into a grin. They'd been so focused on acquisitions, they'd never updated my contract. They assumed I'd just stay loyal. Another mistake. I opened my laptop, went through every client list, every old email thread. My relationships weren't written in a company database. They were built over late-night calls, weekend site visits, and trust. That wasn't something Martex owned. That was mine. At midnight, I shut my laptop and leaned back. I felt a calm I hadn't felt in hours. The pay cut, the humiliation, it all still stung. But now I saw the bigger picture. Martex thought I had no options. Tomorrow they'd find out just how wrong they were. The diner Kira mentioned was one of those places that hadn't changed in 20 years. Cracked red booths, greasy menus, and a waitress who called everyone on. I got there 10 minutes early, mostly because I hadn't slept much. My mind kept replaying yesterday's humiliation like a broken record. Cameron Reed walked in right on time, tall, mid-40s, with the easy confidence of someone who didn't need to prove he was the smartest guy in the room. He spotted me immediately and crossed the diner with a grin that felt real, not corporate. Mitch Taylor, he said, shaking my hand like he meant it. Kira's told me a lot about you. All good things, I hope, I said, sliding into the booth. Only that you're the guy who's been eating our lunch for the past 5 years, he said, smirking as he waved for coffee. I figured it was time we finally talked. I laughed under my breath, but it didn't feel like a joke. I'm not sure how much talking there is to do. I'm still processing some things. Kira filled me in, he said, leaning in. The pay cut? 60%, I said. The number sounded just as absurd out loud as it had on paper. After 9 years, no warning, no reason. Just corporate realignment. Cameron's expression darkened. That's brutal. But honestly, not surprising. Martex has been circling the drain ever since they started cutting costs like a hedge fund. I tilted my head. You know something I don't? He sipped his coffee, then leaned closer. I'll be straight with you. Martex is prepping to offshore your entire department. It's been on the table for months. They just need a handful of senior guys like you to stick around long enough to train the replacements. The words hit me like a gut punch. You're serious? I wouldn't waste your time, he said. We've got people who used to work there. They know what's coming. They wanted to cut your pay, make you miserable, and squeeze whatever's left out of you before they ship the work overseas. I sat back, feeling the anger surge again. I should have seen it. The vague emails about efficiency initiatives. The sudden silence from upper management. It all made sense now. Cameron didn't let the moment hang. He reached into his leather folder, pulled out a single sheet, and slid it across the table. I glanced at it and froze. $170,000 base. Full health coverage. Stock options. A team of 5 reporting directly to me. My throat went dry. You're serious? Dead serious. he said. We've been waiting for you to walk, Mitch. You're not just an employee. You're a competitive edge. Your clients trust you, not the logo on your email signature. We've lost contracts to you before. Now, we want you to lead the charge to win them back. I stared at the paper, my fingers tightening around the edge. For years, I'd been treated like I was lucky to have a seat at the table. Here was someone telling me I was the table. What's the catch? I asked quietly. No catch, Cameron said. We don't hire placeholders. We hire people we can build around. You'd have the authority to shape how we approach client success. Your name's already respected in the industry. I just want to give you the platform and the resources to do it bigger. The waitress came by with more coffee. I barely noticed. I was doing the math in my head. Not just the money, but the time, the freedom, the ability to stop being Martech's doormat. My son, I said, my voice low. He's got medical stuff. The health plan? Full coverage, Cameron said before I could finish. No gaps, no tricks. I've been where you are, trying to juggle work, family, and the feeling that no one upstairs cares. We do things differently here. Something in his tone made me believe him. I looked up, meeting his eyes. He wasn't selling me a dream. He was giving me a lifeline. You want an answer now? I asked. Not today, he said with a grin. But soon. I've got a feeling you won't need long. As we left the diner, the morning air felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking back to my truck dreading what came next. I had a choice, and choices are power. By the time I drove home, I knew one thing for sure. Martech was about to learn what it meant to underestimate me. I walked into Dennis's office the next morning like I was coming in to talk about adjustments to the pay cut. That's what he'd expect. A beaten-down employee, ready to negotiate crumbs just to keep his seat at the table. Instead, I had something else in mind. Morning, Mitch, Dennis said, forcing that smug corporate smile. Tracy was there too, perched in a corner chair with her folder of HR nonsense. Have you had a chance to review your updated compensation package? Yeah, I said, closing the door behind me. But before we get into that, I have some questions. Dennis blinked. Sure, fire away. I didn't sit. Who's taking over my accounts? Westcore, Lumen RX, Franklin Medical. Who's replacing me on those? His smile faltered. Well, we're still evaluating our coverage strategy. There are a few transitions. Transitions, I cut in. You mean offshoring? Tracy shifted in her seat. Dennis cleared his throat. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Don't play dumb, Dennis, I said. I know you're sending my department offshore. You're just keeping me around long enough to train my replacement. Tracy's eyes dropped to the floor like she wanted to sink into it. Dennis's mouth opened, but nothing came out. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. I leaned on his desk, voice low but steady. You know what's funny? I read my contract last night. Turns out, if there's a salary reduction of more than 15%, I can walk immediately. No notice. No transition period. Nothing. Tracy's head snapped up. That clause was from years ago. It's outdated. Not my problem, I said. You signed it. You tried to cut my salary by 60%. You just handed me the keys to walk out without looking back. Dennis tried to recover, his tone softening. Mitch, let's be reasonable here. No, I said. I've been reasonable for 9 years. I've flown out on holidays to save contracts you would have lost. I've missed birthdays and dinners with my kid because Martech needed me. And now you try to gut my pay and ship my work overseas? I'm done. I straightened up, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders. I'm resigning. Effective immediately. Tracy's pen froze over her notes. Mitch, we can work something out. Maybe we can revisit the cut. No, I said again. You don't get to insult me and then expect me to train the guy you're replacing me with. Find someone else. Dennis stood up now, his fake calm cracking. Where are you going? You can't just walk out in the middle of a transition. Oh, I can, I said, almost smiling, and I'm going to. By the way, you'll probably find out soon enough, but I'll save you the suspense. I just accepted an offer with Voltage. Dennis's face drained of color. Voltage? Yeah, I said, walking toward the door. They know how to treat the people who actually bring in revenue. You should try it sometime. I didn't wait for their response. I walked straight to my office, grabbed the cardboard box I kept for emergencies, and started packing. Family photo. A few personal files. My son's emergency meds I always kept in my desk drawer, and that ridiculous Boss of the Year mug they'd given me 3 years ago, back when they still pretended I mattered. By the time I finished, Tracy was standing in my doorway, pale and stiff. "Mitch, security needs to escort you out." "Of course they do," I said. "Wouldn't want the guy who built half your client base to take a pen on the way out." I didn't look back. After 9 years, I walked out the front door like it was just another Tuesday. But I knew I'd just left a crater behind me. I packed my office in under 10 minutes. 9 years of work, boiled down to one cardboard box. A couple of framed photos, my kids' emergency meds, and that Boss of the Year mug they'd handed me like a joke back when they still pretended to care. Security was already waiting outside my door. "Seriously?" I asked, looking at the guard. "You think I'm going to steal a stapler?" "Company policy," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. As we walked down the hallway, I caught Maria and Devin standing near the break room. Both looked like they'd seen a ghost. Theo popped his head out of a cubicle, his face pale. "Check your emails," I said as I passed them. "You'll understand soon." Maria's mouth opened to ask something, but I was already moving. I didn't want to give Dennis or Tracy the satisfaction of watching me leave with my head down. Outside, the guard handed me my box like I was a criminal who'd been caught red-handed. "Thanks," I said, my voice flat. I set the box in my truck, pulled out my phone, and called Cameron. "It's done," I said. There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. "You actually walked out?" "Yeah. No notice, no transition, nothing. I'm done being their punching bag." "Good," he said. "We'll get your onboarding paperwork ready today." The next call I made was to Vernon, my old boss. The guy who had hired me all those years ago before Martech got swallowed by corporate greed. "Vernon," I said when he picked up, "you're going to want to make a call to corporate." "Why? What happened?" "They just lost me," I said. "And by tomorrow, they're going to start losing clients too." There was silence on the line, then a low whistle. "They have no idea what they just did." "Not a clue," I said. I hung up and called Sonia at Westcor, our biggest account, and the one I'd spent the last 3 years protecting from competitors. "Mitch, what's going on?" she asked, the concern in her voice immediate. "I'm not with Martech anymore," I said. "As of this morning, I'm out." There was a beat of silence, then she exploded. "You're kidding me. They let you go? Are they insane? Do they know how much of their business is still here because of you?" "I'm afraid they don't," I said. She sighed sharply. "Well, they're about to find out. Where are you going?" "Voltage," I said simply. "Good," she said. "Send me your contact info there. I want it today. Martech is done with us." I didn't say anything, but I felt that quiet surge of satisfaction in my chest. It wasn't about revenge. It was about knowing that people saw my worth, even when Martech didn't. When I walked back into the office to grab my jacket, my team was waiting by the door. Maria had tears in her eyes. Devin looked like he wanted to punch someone. Theo just stared at the floor. "They're not worth it," I told them. "Check your emails. You'll see my note. And if you need me, you know where to find me." "Voltage?" Maria whispered. I gave her the smallest nod. By the time I got back to my truck, I could already feel my phone buzzing again. Not from Martech, but from people who mattered. Cameron.Vernon.Sonia. I knew the dominoes had just started to fall. By that afternoon, my inbox looked like a war zone. Over 20 emails from clients were waiting, all with subject lines like, "What happened?" and "Need to talk ASAP." Word had gotten out, not from me, but from the silence left in my wake. Martech had underestimated just how closely my name was tied to their contracts. I didn't reply to any of them that day. Not yet. I wasn't about to get dragged into a corporate firestorm on my first day of freedom. Instead, I called Cameron and told him to expect calls from some very angry clients. "You're already a storm, Mitch," Cameron said, half laughing. "We've never had this much inbound interest before. Just let it come to us. You don't need to lift a finger." And I didn't. I stayed quiet, letting the dominoes fall on their own. The next morning, Devin called me from his personal phone. "They're panicking," he said. "Dennis is walking around like he's been shot. Maria's already printing her resume." "She should," I said. "She's not waiting. Neither am I. Devin said. "We're applying to Volt Edge, if you'll have us." "You two were always the best part of that place," I told him. "Cameron will be happy to meet you." By lunchtime, I had 2 more texts from Maria and Theo, both asking for introductions. I wasn't recruiting them, but I wasn't stopping them either. A week later, Volt Edge felt like home. Cameron brought me into executive meetings, treating me less like a new hire and more like a partner. "We're building around you," he said one morning as we mapped out strategy. "You're not just bringing clients, you're bringing credibility." It was a strange feeling, sitting at that table and realizing I wasn't invisible anymore. My ideas weren't just noted for later, they were implemented. By the end of the first month, 2 of my biggest former clients, Westcor and Franklin Medical, had quietly moved their contracts to Volt Edge. 3 more told me they were evaluating options, which was corporate speak for, "We're tired of Martech too." And Martech, they were scrambling. I heard through the grapevine that Dennis had been pulled into emergency calls with the board. They'd canceled the offshore transition plan, hoping to stop the bleeding, but the damage was already done. On my way out of Volt Edge one night, I checked my voicemail. 2 messages from unknown numbers. The first was someone from Martech's legal team trying to sound friendly. "We'd love to schedule a call to discuss a smooth transition of client relationships," she said. I smiled to myself. Smooth transition, huh? That ship had sailed. The second voicemail was just Dennis breathing heavily for a few seconds before hanging up. I didn't respond to any of it, because the truth was simple. I didn't have to fight them. I just had to keep doing my job. And every time another client left their portfolio, I knew they were finally feeling what I'd felt in that conference room. Powerless. By the end of the month, Cameron called me into his office. "You've done more in 4 weeks than I expected in 6 months," he said. "You're not just winning clients, you're rewriting how we do business." I leaned against the doorframe, grinning for the first time in a long time. Guess I just needed someone who believed in what I bring to the table. It was close to midnight when my phone rang. I was sitting in my living room, laptop open, reviewing a Volt Edge proposal. The name on the screen made me pause. Gerald Martech, the CEO himself. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Gerald," I said, answering with the calmest tone I could muster. "Mitch," he replied, his voice too smooth, like he was trying to sound collected. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Bit late for a social call, isn't it?" He chuckled, but I could hear the tension in it. "I'll get to the point. What would it take to bring you back?" For a moment, I thought I misheard him. "Bring me back?" I laughed, low and sharp. "After that little stunt with the pay cut?" "Mitch, listen," he said, his voice dipping into desperation. "What Dennis did was wrong. I've already spoken to HR. We can reverse the pay cut, restore your full salary, and—" "Stop," I cut him off. "It's not about the money." There was silence on the line for a beat. Then he said, "Then what is it about? Respect? A title? We can work something out." "You don't get it," I said. "You're only calling now because you're feeling the pain. Not because you suddenly value me, but because losing me is expensive." I could almost picture him leaning forward, rubbing his temples like he did during board meetings. "Mitch, I'll match whatever Volt Edge is paying you. Salary, bonus, stock, you name it. You've been with us nearly a decade. You belong here." "Belong?" I let out a dry laugh. "When I walked into that conference room, I was worth 60% less to you. Now I'm worth double because the clients are angry? You should take that offer you're dangling and use it to fix what's left of your company." He exhaled, frustrated. "We don't have to make this ugly. I'm not looking for a lawsuit." "Neither am I," I said. "And we both know you'd lose. My contract was ironclad. No non-compete. Your team didn't even bother to look." There was a long pause, then Gerald's voice softened. "You were one of the best we had, Mitch. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it." "Too late," I replied. "I'm building something better now, and I don't need your permission to matter." After we hung up, I just sat there for a while, staring at my phone. My heart wasn't racing. There was no bitterness left, just clarity. For years, I thought I owed that company my loyalty. But loyalty doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I sent a quick text to Cameron. "Mitch, just got a call from Gerald. They're panicking." Cameron, "Good. Let them sweat. You're not going back, right?" Mitch, "Not for all the money in the world." His reply was just one word: perfect. The next morning, I walked into Voltage and felt lighter than I had in years. Kira greeted me with a grin and handed me a coffee. Heard you got a call last night. Word travels fast, I said. Gerald's probably losing his mind, she said, almost giddy. They thought you'd just take the cut and stick around. Now they're watching their own house burn. I smiled. Good. Maybe they'll finally understand what they threw away. 6 months later, my life didn't look anything like the one I left behind. I was now the VP of Client Success at Voltage. 22 people reported directly to me, a team built from the ground up, and not one of them treated like disposable headcount. Maria was leading her own small division. Devin had just been promoted after landing one of our biggest renewals of the quarter. Even Theo, who'd been unsure about leaving Martech at first, had found his place here. We weren't just employees, we were building something we believed in. Voltage had picked up 5 of my former clients. I never called them, never asked for anything, but they found me anyway. We trust you, Sonia at Westcor had told me. Not the logo you used to work for. Those words stuck with me. It wasn't about contracts or company names, it was about people, something Martech had forgotten long ago. I hadn't missed a single dinner with my son in 4 months. We'd gotten into this new habit of cooking together on Sundays, him chopping veggies while I grilled steaks on the deck. No late-night calls from Dennis. No guilt trips from HR about being offline for a weekend. Just quiet, normal life. I didn't realize how much I'd needed that until I finally had it. Every so often, I'd get a whisper about Martech's latest troubles. A client walking away. A senior account manager jumping ship. One day, Kira strolled into my office with a grin. You hear about Dennis? She asked. He's exploring new opportunities. I laughed. Corporate speak for getting shown the door? Pretty much, she said. And Tracy's gone too. Guess HR didn't save her either. I thought I'd feel triumphant. But all I felt was nothing. They weren't my problem anymore. Last month I ran into Vernon at an industry conference in Chicago. He looked older, tired, like Martech had drained every ounce of life from him. He stopped me in the hallway. Mitch, he said, forcing a smile, heard you're doing well. I wanted to say, I'm sorry, for not standing up for you when they pulled that stunt. I nodded. It's fine, Vernon. You don't need to explain. But he kept going? No, I do. You built half of what we had. We should have fought for you. Instead, we just let them. He shook his head. I hope you know none of that was personal. I didn't have the heart to tell him it was personal, at least for me, that I'd spent years giving everything to a place that treated me like I was replaceable. I just smiled and said, water under the bridge. Walking away, I realized he was still trapped in that world, the one where people believe the company will save them if they're loyal enough. I'd been that guy once, not anymore. When I got home that night, my son was waiting with 2 bowls of ice cream and a grin. Did you win? He asked. I laughed. Yeah, kid, I think we did. I think about that 15-minute meeting a lot, the one where they slid that paper across the table and cut me in half like I was just a number on a spreadsheet. Back then, I felt powerless. I sat there trying to act calm while my whole career was being gutted in front of me. But the truth is, they never had the power. Not really. They thought the company owned me, my skills, my clients, my worth. They didn't understand that what I'd built over those 9 years wasn't theirs to take. The relationships, the trust, the late-night calls that saved accounts from walking, that wasn't Martech's property. That was mine. The money is good now, better than I ever thought it could be. Voltage values what I bring to the table, and they've made it clear I'm not just another cog in the machine. But that's not the real win. The real win is being seen, being respected. Not as a name on a payroll sheet, but as a man who built something that mattered. Sometimes I replay that last conversation with Gerald in my head. His voice was tight, almost panicked. What would it take to bring you back? He thought it was about the salary or the bonus, or maybe some new title they could slap on my email signature. But it was never about that. It was about principle. If I'd said yes, if I'd gone crawling back for a bigger paycheck, it would have meant admitting they were right, that I was only worth what they were willing to pay. And I know now that isn't true. My son asked me last week, Dad, are you happy now? He doesn't know the details, just that I'm home more, smiling more. I told him, yeah, buddy, I'm really happy. And I meant it. For years, I thought loyalty meant sacrificing everything for a company, even when they treated me like I was disposable. But walking away showed me something I didn't expect, that I never needed their permission to succeed. The other night, Cameron said something over dinner with the exec team that stuck with me. You know, Mitch, sometimes the quietest revenge is just doing better than they ever imagined. He's right. I didn't burn their house down. I didn't scream or sue or start a war. I just walked away and built something they can't touch. I think about that moment in the conference room when Dennis slid me the paper with the 60% cut. Back then, I thought it was the end. Turns out, it was just the start.